Lord, you purchased my salvation. You brought me in and out of season. You knew and loved me before creation. My love just can't find.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. My name is Bruce. I'm very excited to be back before you all. Apologies for last week. We really wanted to get that lesson out, but if you all would bear with me at the end of part one of this video, I will give you some of my thoughts on last week's lesson. It was very powerful. Prayerfully, your Sunday school teacher explained it in a way that made it plain. But again, we will go into a little bit of it at the end of part one. Prayerfully, you all are having a great week. Again, it's the middle part of the week. The weekend is in view. Prayerfully, you all are doing well. Again, as I said, young people, most of you all are in your first couple of days of school. Again, hopefully you all are transitioning well back to school. Teachers and administrators and all of you guys, prayerfully everything is going well with back to school. As we get into this week's lesson number 12, it is entitled God's Gracious Rewards, and it comes to us from Matthew 20, verses 1 through 16. The time of writing is AD 30. The place is Perea. The golden text, The man said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, I will give you. And they went their way. And that comes to us from Matthew chapter 20 and verse 4. And before we get into it, we want to look at the emphasis for the young people and for the adults. Again, for the young people, you guys need to recognize that you can trust God, right? You can put your trust in his goodness, right? And even though you may not understand and you may not have the ability to see the big picture, you know that everything he has or everything that he's given you is good, right? For the adults, sometimes we get into a contractual way of thinking, right? You think that, okay, well, if I do this, then God has to do that. And listen, that's not how it works. What we should be doing, and that's all of us, youth and adults, is we should learn to serve God out of love, not out of, hey, if I do this, he's going to give me this, right? And so as we think about this particular parable, and it's one that, if we're all honest with ourselves, maybe you have found yourself in that first group's mentality, right? You've been working hard, and someone with Johnny come lately, and they get the same thing you got, right? Or a couple of examples that the expositor used. One brother was a chef in a restaurant. He enjoyed it very much, liked his job. One of the other cooks left. One of the other chefs left. They replaced him with someone who didn't have the same amount of experience, and yet he got the same amount of pay. And that individual, he thought long and hard about quitting. And some of you all may have been in those situations where you have worked hard, you were passed over or whatever may have you, and someone came in, fresh off the street without the same level of experience, and they got the same amount of pay that you got, right? And so in that individual, he contemplated quitting. But what he ultimately came to is that he enjoyed his job, and he didn't worry about what the next person got to do the same thing. And ultimately, as we bring it back to the church, we don't need to worry about what gifts God bestows upon his children. We don't need to worry about, okay, well, I've been walking with the Lord all of this time. And then these people, again, if we want to use an example, let's take people on death row, right? All of those individuals have an opportunity to give themselves to the Lord if they haven't already done so, right? And you may say to yourself, well, when you live like a hellion all your life, and then all of a sudden before you die, you're going to be allowed to say the sinner's prayer. And some people, unfortunately, feel some type of way about that. So before we go too far into it, let's jump right into our lesson here. Again, God's gracious rewards. As we intro the lesson, The purpose of our lesson is to encourage everyone, all believers, to rejoice when God gives undeserved blessings to others. And more on that here in a moment. Do you resent someone who gets more than you? Perhaps he or she has a better job or a nicer house. You may honestly feel you deserve those things just as much. God's word, however, and it's very important, everyone. God's word tells us to stop looking at what other people have. Listen, what God has for you is for you. Excuse me. Because this leads to jealousy, lust, resentment, and possibly even theft or murder. Because again, now you're envying, right? You're green with envy because so-and-so got a new car, so-and-so got a new house, so-and-so got a new job, so-and-so got a new something, and you feel like, well, where's mine? One of Jesus's kingdom parables addresses this human tendency to want to make certain, and listen to this, everyone, the human tendency to want to make certain that we get our fair share and that others do not get more than theirs, right? So you can't even enjoy what God has given you because you worried about what the next person has over there. Jesus took pictures from everyday life to help his hearers understand how God works with people by using familiar things in life, everyone, Jesus enabled a wide range of people to comprehend the truth that he wanted them to learn. And again, this is why he spoke in parables. The parable of the laborers in the vineyard teaches that what we receive from God is due solely, and I'm going to say that again, slowly, what we receive from God is due solely to his grace, right? Nothing that you did is due solely to his grace. The teaching of the Pharisees was that people could earn God's favor by their righteous deeds. Again, if that was the case, all of the people who are philanthropic, the people who give to charity, all of those people would be good. But as we know, again, you're not saved by your works can't save you. Jesus' story demonstrated that God compensates people according to his own goodness. When the laborers who had toiled the full day complained that they should receive more than those who had worked for only a short time, the owner answered them, they had received what they were promised. As the owner, he could treat others graciously if he so chose, right? In the parable of the laborers in the vineyard, we learn of God's sovereign grace in giving rewards. Today's aim, everyone, the facts. We want to investigate and interpret Jesus' parable of the laborers in the vineyard. The principle of our lesson to teach that God sovereignly rewards according to his grace, not according to human standards. Application is to help students appreciate and accept the actions of their sovereign God. See, and that's very important, right? Because you can find yourself, if you're not in the right spirit, in the right mind frame, you can find yourself getting mad, right? Why are you doing this for them? Why are you doing that for them? Why am I not getting it, right? The parable of the workers in the vineyard is a beautiful picture of the sovereign grace, goodwill, and large-hearted generosity that God extends to outcasts, to sinners, and to latecomers through Jesus. See, that's another thing that we're going to tackle here in this lesson. Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right I will give you. Matthew 20:4, which is our practical point. Peter spoke for the disciples when he asked Jesus what reward he would give them for having to leave their homes and families to follow him. Part of Jesus' reply was a parable illustrating a wrong attitude towards kingdom reward. See, the disciples were sitting around and they were like, well, we certainly going to get more than what they're going to get, right? I mean, what are you going to do for us for having leave everything behind and follow you, right? And again, they were asking or they were looking at it with human eyes, right? There will probably always be those who complain about the terms of remuneration God gives, thereby losing the joy of the Lord in his harvest. J. Dwight Pentecost wrote, by this parable, the Lord desired those who had asked what they received, Matthew 19:27, to learn the lesson that they were to work in the vineyard and leave the reward to him. So ultimately, you don't worry about it, right? You don't worry about what's waiting for you when you get to glory, right? You just know what God promised you, right? How will rewards be determined? Perhaps the disciples and others listening were already calculating just how much they would get because they had followed Jesus from the very beginning or soon thereafter. One thing we can learn from the parable of the workers in the vineyard is what our attitude toward rewards should be. And see, here's another thing, thank you, Holy Spirit. It's a funny thing how we like to spend other people's money, or how we like to tell other people how they should spend their money, right? And we see that in this lesson toward the end where the workers are like, well, hey, we deserve more. Well, no, you deserve what we agreed upon, right? You see it in the professional sport world all the time, right? Our favorite players will, from time to time, feel like they're worth more or they deserve more, and so they hold out, or they don't report, right? Sometimes the team gives in, sometimes the team doesn't, right? But we're going to see here in our lesson, especially in part 2, that what you agreed upon, well, that's what it is. And again, if the person holding the money feels generous enough to give you more than what they agreed upon, then that's on them. But you can't determine that for yourself. You can't say, well, hey, listen, I did this, this, and this, and that means that you should give me this, this, and this. No, it doesn't work like that. So as we look at verse 1, for the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is a householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard. So again, as we talked about in the intro, we know that Jesus used familiar stories and familiar things to get his point across. They're in Israel. Obviously, they know about grapes and they know about having to harvest them, right? So he's saying the kingdom of heaven is like a man, right, who's gone out into the marketplace, right? And he's looking for people to come into the field and work. Verse 2. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, he sent them into his vineyard. So look at that, right? So he went to the marketplace early in the morning, and we're going to talk about it when we get into notes, at 6 o'clock, and he went back at 9 o'clock, he went back at 12 o'clock, he went back at 3 o'clock, and then he went back at 5, right? So this is the first group of the first shift here at 6 o'clock in the morning, right? So he goes out and he meets with these men, and they all agree to terms. Okay, I'm gonna give you a penny for an honest day's work, and everyone is like, okay, yeah, that was the going rate, right? If you lived at that time, and I know when you hear me say a penny, and we know that a penny doesn't go anywhere these days, right? But back then, it went far, right? And actually, and I'm running over my notes, but a penny or denarius was the standard wage for a Roman soldier, right? So essentially, they had agreed to the same wage that the Roman soldiers were paid on a daily basis, right? The practical point for 1 and 2 is it is the privilege of every Christian to be sent forth to labor for the Lord. And again, it is a privilege it is the privilege of every Christian to be sent forth to labor for the Lord. So again, whatever your gift is, right? Your gift could be preaching, your gift could be teaching, your gift could be evangelism, your gift could be helps. Whatever your gift is, whatever God has given you to work in the body, you should be ecstatic to take that gift or those skill sets, right, and go out into the field, right? Because again, what is the mission? The mission is to spread the gospel, right? So we should all be cheerful, right, as we go out and tell others about what God has done for us, how Jesus saved our life, how he washed away our sins. Verse 3, and he went out about the 3rd hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. So again, this is what we were saying earlier. So he's gone out at 6 o'clock and he's found a group of guys, and they're working, and he's like, this ain't enough guys. I need some more guys. So he goes back to the marketplace and he sees these guys. They're just standing there. They're not doing anything. Right? And again, going back in the first one, again, the kingdom of heaven is like this field, right? So God, he's already got some people, right? So, but he's not satisfied. So I'm going to go back out and look for some more people. Again, that's our job. As we have been placed in the vineyard, as we are working in the vineyard, right? We should want to go and get other people to bring them in the vineyard. Again, this vineyard is like the kingdom of heaven. You don't want the kingdom of heaven to be barren, right? So again, you want to go out. You don't want other people to suffer in torment for eternity, right? So you're going to work hard to bring in other people, just like the owner did. I need to go get some more people. Verse 4. And he said unto them, go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, I will give you. And they went their way. Now listen, everyone, you see this right here in verse 4? And he said unto them, go ye also into the vineyard, and whatever is right, I will give you. So they didn't agree on a penny for a day's work, right? They went into that vineyard to work, not knowing what they were going to get, right? They just knew that they had a job. They were given work. So again, he told them, I will give you what is right. So they had faith, and they understood without a contract, without a binding agreement, without a handshake, that, okay, he's going to take care of us at the end of the day. Okay, cool. Those individuals, that group, the second group, all right, now they've gone into work. Now, again, as we said, the first group has been working for about 3 hours at this point. So now that second group comes in and helps along with that first group. Verse 5. And he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour and did likewise. Again, so he went out at 6, 9. Now it is noontime, right? He's going out in the hottest part of the day. Found some other people standing around not doing anything. Y'all want some work? Come on. We got some work for y'all. Then again, looked around looked around at about 5. Said the same thing. Excuse me. At about 3. So he went out at noon. Then he went out at 3 again. You guys ain't got nothing to do? Come on in. The work is plenty. The workers are few. So come on. And again, as we get into verse 6, and about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing idle and said unto them, why stand, I went too far. Let us look back at practical point number 2 that covers verses 3 through 5. We can be sure that our faithful service will be rewarded by the Lord. Again, we can be sure that our faithful service will be rewarded by the Lord. Again, God is not man that he should lie. So when the promises of God are yes and amen. So if he said that if you accept my son, if you accept him into your heart, you will be grafted into the family. You will be given a reward in heaven. You can believe that is going to be the case. Verse 6. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing idle and said unto them, why stand ye here all day idle? So he's going back out. Now it is about 5 o'clock at this point, right? And I want to remind you all to the ones that he talked to at noon and the ones that he talked to at 3, he didn't promise them anything as well. He didn't say, hey, if you guys come work for me, I'm going to give you a penny. I'm going to give you the set wage. He said, listen, if you guys decide to come and work for me, you guys go into my vineyard, whatever is right, that's how we'll settle it out. Okay. Verse 7, they say unto, and I love going back into verse 6, and I love what he said. He said unto them, why stand ye here all the day idle? If you think about it, there's some people out there who, God has been trying to get them. People have been praying for them. People have been reaching out for them, and yet they're just, for whatever reason, or there's a group of people who no one has gone out and brought the gospel to. No one has said, hey, do you know Jesus? Right. And they're just standing here. They're just lost. They're not doing anything. Right. Until the man or woman of God comes up and say, hey, have you heard about Jesus? Have you let me tell you about this wonderful God of ours, right? And so again, in verse 7, they said unto him, because no man hath hired us. He saith unto them, go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that shall ye receive. So again, he's like, y'all have been standing around all day. They're like, no one hired us. No one came. No one had any work for us. I got you. Say less. Y'all going in the vineyard. Now, I know there's about an hour left in the workday, but I tell you what, whatever you get, again, I'm going to set you straight. Whatsoever is right, that shall ye receive. Right. So now, as we said, he's going out and got about 5 shifts of workers. Right. They've all been working, some longer than others. Right. Now, here it is. We're coming to the end of the day. Before we get to verse 8, let's look at the practical point number 3 that covers verses 6 through 7. Diligent, faithful service should characterize every Christian regardless of his age or circumstance. I want to say that again. Diligent, faithful service should characterize every Christian regardless of his age or circumstance. Listen, to my young people, I don't care how young you are, right? You identify yourself as a Christian, you should be faithful in your service. You should be faithful in spreading the gospel. You should be faithful in praying for others. You should be faithful in being a servant. You should be faithful in those things that edify the kingdom, not faithful in those things that will bring this division or disunity, right? Verse 8. So when even was come, the Lord of the vineyard saith unto his steward, call the laborers and give them their hire, beginning from the last until the first. Now here is where it gets interesting, everyone, right? It's the end of the day. Again, as I said, everyone has worked, everyone has done their part. Now it is time for everyone to get paid, right? And so you would expect, because again, it's human nature, he's going to pay the ones that started at 6 o'clock, right? They've been there the longest. Nope. That's not what he told his steward. He told his steward, hey, the people that I just sent over here about an hour ago, start with them first. And then the people that came before them, and the people that came before them, and before them, right? Practical point that covers verse 8, and we're going to see this practical point again in part 2. But God's rewards are not based on the outward, superficial standards by which people often judge one another. He looks on the heart. Again, God's rewards are not based on outward, superficial standards by which people often judge one another. He looks on the heart. Again, if you all are familiar with the story of King David and how he sent the prophet to Jesse's house, and Jesse kept bringing out all of his strong, good-looking sons, and he was like, no, that's not who I want. That's not who I want. Where's the other one? The runt. Go get me the runt. That's the one I want. Right. See, we get so fixated on muscles and beauty and how they speak and all of this other stuff, but we don't look on the inside. Right. There's a lot of beautiful outside packages that are rotten on the inside. Right. And so, again, God doesn't look at how you look. He doesn't look at what you say. Right. He's looking right here to your heart, because, again, your mouth can fry chicken. Right. But what's in your heart, well, that's going to come out. Excuse me. So as we look at that first group, going back into verse 1 and verse 2, the first group, many of Jesus' parables began saying, for the kingdom of heaven is like. These stories describe what is involved in living under God's rule. God orders his kingdom by different priorities and values than those of human governments. The parable in this passage tells of a man who owned a large vineyard. At harvest time, he needed a number of laborers to pick the grapes. In Israel, there were always people who did not have permanent full-time employment. These people would hire themselves out as day laborers. And I know some of y'all know what that feels like, because I've been a day laborer. It's not fun. If an employer needed day laborers, he would go to the marketplace where potential workers would gather, hoping to gain work. The man went out early in the morning to get the workers he needed to harvest his grapes. The standard wage for work like this was a penny or a denarius per day. Although the value of a denarius seems abysmally low for the entire day's work, it was the daily wage of a Roman soldier, as we said earlier, and could be considered quite generous compared to what the laborers sometimes received. This wage would have provided for a man's family. See, again, as we said, a penny doesn't go far these days, but back then, you could take that same penny and feed your family for the evening. The man and the laborers agreed to these terms, and he sent them into the vineyard at the beginning of the workday, which was about 6 o'clock in the morning, as we said earlier. The second group covers verses 3 through 4. After a few hours, the man realized that he needed more laborers to get the harvest completed. Ripe grapes do not stay good for long, especially in a hot climate. Those of you who have grapes or are familiar with plants, you know exactly what I'm talking about, especially here where it's hot. They do not stay good for long, especially in a hot climate like that in Israel. So the work had to be done quickly. The landowner thus went back to the marketplace to hire some more workers around the third hour or 9 o'clock. He found some men who were willing to work. Instead of agreeing on a set wage for them, the man promised to give whatever was right. With only this vague promise from the owner, they went into the vineyard and began their work. As we illuminate our golden text, which was verse 4, it has much to teach us about how God's ways are higher than our ways, right? Our golden text focuses on one of the ways this truth should affect our behavior. The key part of the verse concerns the wages for these new workers. Instead of specifying how much they will receive as he did with his initial hires, he simply says he will give them whatsoever is right. What this points to is one of the foundational teachings of Scripture, that we are to live our lives by faith in God, right? And this particular parable emphasizes that this faith includes trust in God's goodness, right? Because again, you live by faith, you walk by faith, not by sight, right? Because your eyes will trick you. Your ears will trick you. Your senses will play games with you, right? God is not going to play games with you. The vital nature of trusting in God's goodness is a reoccurring theme of Christ's teachings in the parable of the talents, Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30. The unprofitable servant is thrown into outer darkness because he buried his master's money instead of using it to gain more for him. When he was asked for an explanation of his behavior, he said, "I knew thee that thou art a hard man, and I was afraid." Right? And those of you that are familiar with that, you know that he gave some to one, he gave some to another, and he gave some to another. One turned it into 10, the other one turned it into 5, I believe. And this particular one, I think one turned it into 2 bags, and this other one, he just buried it because, again, he said he was afraid. While it is true that this parable does not explicitly say what the master character was, it is pretty clear he stands for God with his perception of what God was like. He would not serve him. He would not serve him. He was punished as one who lacked faith in God. So again, because he lacked the faith, right, to take the money and make it grow, he decided to bury it in the sand. He showed a lack of faith. Whereas the other ones, they had faith and they put faith to work. By trusting in the fairness of the employer, one who could stand for God, these latecomers to the vineyard, which stands for the kingdom of heaven, would enjoy the same benefits as those who were hired at the start. Again, listen, it doesn't matter when you come to God. You could have came to God as a youngster, right? My pastor always talks about he's 9 years old, right? You have some people who don't come to the Lord until they're in their 60s, 70s, and in some cases 80s. And in some cases, when they're on death's door, right? But the promises are still the same for everybody, right? By trusting, at the heart of God's goodness is his grace. If we fail to understand that what we receive from God is not related to the extent or quality of our labor, but instead to the simple free grace of the Savior, we will find ourselves without a true grasp of who we are, who God is, and the only way we can have a relationship with him. Again, you can't do it in your own strength, right? Again, you can't. When we cry out for justice to be done, we need to be careful what we are wishing for. Thank goodness God does not deal with us as we deserve. Rather, he is abundantly generous with us. We can trust that he is overflowing in goodness and fairness towards his people. The third and fourth groups, which covered verse 5, at noon and then again at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he went back to the marketplace to get more workers. Each time he found more available laborers to join those already in the vineyard. With those later groups of laborers, the owner made the same vague agreement that he had made with the second group. He simply promised to do what was right for them, apparently satisfied with those terms, and trusting the judgment of the owner, the workers proceeded to join those who had been toiling in the vineyard since the early morning. As we look at the fifth group, which covers verses 6 and 7, the workday in ancient Israel ended around 6 o'clock in the evening. At the 11th hour or 5 o'clock in the evening, with just 1 hour remaining before the end of the day, the owner recruited a final shift of workers, right? Once again, the owner did not set a specific wage for them. No doubt they supposed that they would get only a small compensation for 1 hour's work. Nevertheless, they trusted him to give them whatever was right. Notice that five different hirings took place throughout the course of the day. Yet only one group of workers was assigned a wage. We can be sure, however, that each person hired was grateful for the opportunity, especially those who were hired toward day's end. After all, the vineyard owner could have left them unemployed. And think about it. Again, the vineyard owner is representing God. What if God just said, you know what? I'm good, man. That's enough. Right? Those ones that I've already got, those ones that are already sealed in the Lamb's Book of Life, that's it. We're good. We're shutting shop down. Everybody else who was playing around, everyone else who was waiting till they got themselves all the way right or whatever may have you, that's it. We're done. Nothing. But again, you serve a righteous God. You serve a mighty God. You serve a God that loves, right? Each and every one of us, he formed in our mother's womb. So each and every one of us, he has a unique relationship with. He doesn't want to see us go into eternity in torment, right? So he keep coming back. Hey, first group, y'all come on in. Go back out. Hey, y'all come on in. Go back out. Hey, come on in. You keep going until you either get everybody or, hey, the final horn is blasted and that's it. We're done here. And at that point, no one is going to be able to say, well, no one told me, I didn't have an opportunity. None of that. No. Everyone has an opportunity. It's just how many people go ahead on and take it. As we look at the procedure for the wages, which covered verse 8, the Old Testament law was careful to protect both the employer and the employee. The owner could expect to receive a full amount of labor, the full amount of labor agreed upon. Now, isn't that funny? You know, that's, right? Right? That an employer that pays an employee expects an honest and full day of labor from them. Now, listen. Moving on. The laborer was entitled to receive the full wage for which he had contracted, right? So again, every one of us that have a job, right? We filled out applications, we went through the interview process, we got hired, they told us what we were going to make, or we negotiated a wage, right? We expect them when we clock in, right, on Monday morning, and when we clock out on Friday evening for all of that time in between to be paid, right? The same way that those employers, right, feel like, okay, if I'm going to pay you the wage that we agreed upon or the wage we negotiated, I expect you to do the work. right? Fully, without finding ways to, or getting creative with, hey man, or finding creative ways to not do, or to not be productive, excuse me. The law required that the the law required that the wage be paid on the evening of the day that the laborer had worked. Because again, in Leviticus 19:13 and Deuteronomy 24:14 through 15. Because again, remember, they're living essentially check to check, right? So if you owe me, this is what I'm going to go home and use to buy food to feed my family, right? So if you hold on and you don't pay me like you're supposed to at the end of the night, well, you could really be putting me in a bad spot, right? When evening came, the owner gave his steward specific instructions about paying the laborers. The fact that they were to be paid was expected. The manner in which they were to be paid, beginning with the hired last, was almost certainly different from the norm. The amount they would be paid would be totally unprecedented. This was a payday that was certain to be remembered by all the workers. This generous action illustrates God's grace. The workers who started at 5 p.m. did not deserve to be paid for a full day, but they were paid a day's wage anyway. Notice no one complained about being paid too much. And really, we're going into part 2 with that last paragraph, which again, we will bring forth to you all later on in this week. And as we are transitioning back to the previous lesson that we talked about in the beginning, that I just want to share some thoughts with you all about the parable of the prodigal son, And as we look at it, you know, from the father's perspective, and I'll be very, very quick. But there's 2 groups that I want to highlight that really stood out to me in this lesson, a story of forgiveness, right? And again, you know, parents, understand that children are sometimes going to make mistakes, right? All of us as parents hope that our kids do the right thing, that they fly the straight path, that they don't cause any problems. Unfortunately, that may not be the case, right? And as a parent, right, when your child, and knowing that situation in the parable of the prodigal son, he was a teenager going to his father saying, hey, listen, give me everything that I'm supposed to get when you die so that I can go off and do my own thing, right? The father never said, well, son, hold on now, you know, I don't know if you really want to do this. I mean, or, you know, there's a lot that goes into this. And oh, by the way, I got to sell some property just to give you your portion, right? I can't just give you your portion and not give your older brother his. So I got to sell what I got and split it between you two because you want to leave the house and go off and do your own thing, right? Again, if you go back and look at that story, the father never protested. He did what he did. He did what he needed to do. He took the steps necessary, right? And he allowed his son to make his own decisions, right? Listen, if you raise your kids right, if you had them in church on Sunday, Wednesday night Bible study, or Friday night Bible study, if you had them involved in youth groups or whatever as they were coming up, right? And I'm going to be honest with you all, I am an example of that. Because when my parents became saved, listen, that was the norm in our house. My mother read scripture. My mother prayed. We went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night. We read prayers on Friday night. Again, she poured in us, right? So even though as a teenager and as a young adult, I kind of strayed away from the church because of my own stuff, right? When we were invited to go to when we were invited to the church that I belonged to back in 2007, it was nothing to go in. And once I went in and sat and listened to the word, it all flooded back, right? And so it was easy for me to make that transition back into the fold, right? Because again, when you train a child up the right way, they won't depart, right? They may do their own thing, right? But there's always in the back of their mind, yeah, I can go home, right? And so for me, when I got to my church, that was home. That was me coming back home, right? And again, as you think about that, right? When your kids come back all messed up, right? They broken, right? Just down bad. That's not the time to, hey, listen, I told you that was going to happen. I told you I should let you fail. I should let you, you know what? I'm not going to help you because I told you not to do that. Then you done took my money and you done blowed it. You done did some stupid stuff. Now here you coming back to me, asking me to put you back or asking me to take care of you or look after you. Listen, that's not the time, right? There's a time where you can have a conversation that goes, hey, listen, you know, this is what I was trying to explain to you. But when they come back, that initial coming back, you should be like that father was, right? He was every day. He was looking. Is the day to day? Is the day to day he's going to come back? Is the day to day? Is the day to day he's going to come back? Is the day to day? Because again, if you look in the lesson, when he saw him afar off, man, that father went to running. He didn't care that his son squandered his inheritance. He didn't care that he ran off and did all manner of things, right? And if you look at it, he never asked him, what'd you do? Hey, what'd you do with my money? What did you do when you were wherever you were? What did you do? He never said that. He gave him a hug. He told them folks to get his shoes. He gave him a robe, put a ring on his finger, right? Elevated him back into right standing. Listen, and there's the second group that I want to touch on are the backsliders, right? God gave you a gift. You were running hard for him. And all of a sudden, something got in your way and you just kind of drifted. You drifted. And before you know it, you found yourself just really, just in sin. Really in sin. Like deep into sin. And I love this quote here. He found the oft-quoted adage very true. Listen, folks. Sin will take you farther than you want to go sin will take you farther than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, and cost you more than you want to pay, right? So now you're in your backslidden condition because you are out there in the world, you're letting your flesh run wild, right? And then all of a sudden you wake up in that pig pen and you say, wait a minute, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing here? Let me go back to my father's house. Let me go back. And it is just like God, right? He doesn't say, hey, listen, what were you doing? What? Hold on now. Hold on. I didn't think about this. Wait. I gave you the gift. You know, I sealed your name in the Lamb's Book of Life. I've done all of these positive things in your lives, and you just gonna run out on me? And now you want to come back? Hold on. I need to think about that. God doesn't do that. The moment you come back in your backsliding condition and you go down and you reaffirm yourself, boom, back in. And again, without him giving you 21 questions about what you did and where you were. So again, as I'm closing out, because those were two main things that I wanted to bring out if I was able to bring that lesson, and a couple of practical points also from that lesson that I'd like to share with you all. We're going to start with number 5. Practical point number 5. We are really not worthy to be called God's children. Thankfully, it does not depend on that. Right? Because again, we all did our own thing at one point. We all were rebels. We all were covered, literally covered in sin, the same way he was covered in pig slop, right? By his own choice, right? His own choices led to where he was, just like our own choices sometimes lead us to where we find ourselves, right? But again, isn't it just like God not to ask where you were Isn't it just like God not to ask why you squandered his gifts? Isn't it just like God to not say, hey, you wasted that? No. Here is some shoes. Here is your robe. Here is your ring. You've been placed back in the right standing, forgiven. Or in the case of those, listen, and the last practical point from that lesson that I want to share with you all, we should join, and honestly, this practical point fits with this week's lesson as well. We should join heaven in celebrating every time a lost sinner is found. Again, we should join heaven in celebrating every time a lost sinner is found, right? Again, that son left, did his thing, was out there. And yet his father waited. God does the same thing. He does the same thing. When you out there in the world, whether you're in the backsliding condition or if you've not accepted him at all, he's waiting on you. Literally waiting on you. It's the day to day. It's the day to day. Now, mind you, I'm being a little, because God knows everything. He knows all. So he knows the day that you're going to give yourself to him, if you're going to give yourself at all, right? But he's watching and waiting for you. You're not going to catch him by surprise. His son coming back didn't catch him by surprise. Again, he was watching and waiting. And when he saw him, he rejoiced. Parents, do the same. When your kids leave, they mess up, they find themselves in trouble, or they find themselves in the throes of addiction. Listen, when they come back, rejoice, celebrate. Listen, while they out there, pray for them. Keep them covered in prayer. But listen, let them live. Let them live. And when they come home, wrap your arms around them. Tell them how much you love them. Put them back in right standing. And do all that you need to do to get them to a good place, right? Where they can be productive members in the body. And so as we've come to the end of part one, and again, that's just some brief thoughts on the lesson of the parable of the prodigal son, told from the viewpoint of the father, right? And I love that. I love that because again, that's God, right? That's God. Listen, God doesn't tell you, no, don't do that. He gave us free will. If you want to do it, do it. He's not going to stop you, right? But you can't come back and say, well, God, why'd you let me do that? No, you did what you wanted to do. You were going to do it anyway. I was just there to pick you up when you finally realized what you did was wrong. And so again, as we're drawing this particular part one video to a close, again, for those of you who do not know Christ and the pardoning of his sin, I would invite you all to at least consider giving your life to the Lord today, because again, tomorrow is not promised, right? And so I look forward to seeing you all for part two, where we're going to get into, and I kind of I got into it a little bit today, but we're going to see how much money those individuals got that showed up with 1 hour left, with 3 hours left, with, again, those ones that showed up in the cool of the day. And then we're going to see how the first group, and probably the second group is probably in that well, no, how that first group is going to respond, right? And so again, I look forward to seeing you all for part two. Again, prayerfully, you all are going, prayerfully, you all will come back and join us back on the corner, JMG Corner. Until then, everyone, God bless.